Right, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Chelsea. I am the Director of Outreach for MADVoters. If you are not super familiar with MADVoters, we are a social advocacy organization focused on legislative education and voter outreach. Tonight, our panel is going to feature 4 of our amazing MVP candidates. These are people that our organization has verified that they align with our values and that they're really going to put in the work for Hoosiers. We're really excited to have them here, and we're really excited for you to be a part of this panel. And our panel tonight is all about education in Indiana, which I know we all are worried about, we all have questions about. Hopefully, we can all learn a little bit about it tonight. So I am going to start with you guys and how you are, well, actually, we're going to start with Jennifer McCormick. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. I am Jennifer McCormick. I'm the Democratic candidate for governor. I was also your last state superintendent of public instruction, the last elected, I should say. I was number 44 and there is no number 45. And so I am thrilled to be here. I want to thank MADVoters for making sure that Hoosiers have an opportunity to be informed, but I encourage everybody who's on this call to make sure you go inform others. Prior to being a state superintendent, I was a classroom teacher for 10 years. I was a principal and I was a local superintendent for 7.5. So I'm just thrilled to be here. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you so much. Cinde, please.
Hi, I'm Cinde Wirth. I'm the Democratic nominee for Indiana's 6th District for the U.S. House of Representatives. I am a former public school teacher. I'm a scientist and a small business person. I'm a first-generation college graduate and public school all the way through. So I was an educational ambassador to Miyoshi, Japan from Bartholomew Consolidated School Corporation, and I was a nationally selected Albert Einstein Fellow to the U.S. House of Representatives, where I learned about policy and education policy. So I'm pretty into education and finishing my doctorate in educational studies.
Thank you. We have some interesting perspectives here tonight for sure. Karen, please introduce yourself.
Oh, thank you, Chelsea. Appreciate it. And again, kudos to MADVoters. You guys are just incredible. Awesome sauce. I'm Karen Whitney, and I am a badly retired college president who, at the age of 64 and on a cold, dark day in February, decided I love Indiana and I love the people, and I did not like the politics. So I decided to embark on this journey. It's a 9-month job interview. And it's Jen's fault because you were down in Plainfield one night in August and you kept saying more people need to run, more people need to run. So Governor, it's your fault. So I have in terms of educational credentials, I'm a retired president. I've proudly served as president of Clarion University in Pennsylvania from 2010 to 2017. I also previously served as a vice president, they called it vice chancellor at IUPUI for 11 years, and then I served as a president at a college in Illinois. My doctorate is in higher education economics and finance, so that means I know numbers. I also served as a VP for student affairs and dean of students, and I have walked with thousands of students in their journey through college. So I have great opinions on K-12, on how it prepares and doesn't prepare folks for college. I have a great many opinions on finance, both at the K-12 and higher ed area, and I cannot get ready to jump into those questions tonight. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Karen. And Sandy, please.
Helps if I unmute it. Hi, everybody. My name is Sandy James. I am Johnson County for the majority of my life. My late husband and I moved here when we first married and we raised our children. They went through Greenwood schools, and I have been a teacher at Greenwood schools for 30 years this year. I've taught everything in the spectrum of 7th grade all the way up to what I teach now, which is called dual credit, which means my psychology students are getting college credit. So I've seen every range of student abilities, and I have a lot of opinions, especially on the new the diploma they're hoping to replace the honors diploma with. I have a bachelor's and a master's. Was working on my PhD, but haven't quite finished it yet. But teaching has always been my life, and I have a lot of opinions on the changes that are coming. I'm in District 58 for Indiana House. I a little bit like, you know, Karen, this isn't anything I ever planned to do, but the lady that is my opponent ran unopposed last election, and that just doesn't seem right to me. And I was very, I don't know, displeased with some of the things that she did that I thought really hurt LGBTQ kids. So thanks for having us here. This is a really great forum. MADVoters is amazing.
Thank you so much, Sandy. And again, thank you all for being here. I'm so excited to hear from all of these different perspectives. And it is clear that all of you have lived a life of service to others. Teaching is an incredible service. So thank you for all the different ways that you have been influential in this space. So we're going to jump right into it because you all said you have opinions and we want to hear them. So let's talk about these new diploma requirements. There is a lot of confusion around these. People don't really know what exactly this means for their high school children. So please, if you guys would love to shed some light on that for us and let us know those strong opinions.
I'm happy to step up first for a minute. I've done a lot of research into these. The Indiana.gov has a series of basically PowerPoint slides that does everything but say what they're really doing with these new diplomas. So it takes a little bit of digesting. The gist of it is they are switching. No longer will we have Core 40, which was, if anybody knows the history of it, it was put together by businesses in a way that said that these are the things we think that a well-rounded employee should know. This is something that would help this person in life, help them be a better employee, work their way up the ladder. So this was designed by businesses and it's going to disappear. What they're going to replace Core 40 with is, and this, by the way, has been a very successful diploma. They're replacing it with one that has less requirements for academic classes. They are going to kick out a couple of math. They're going to kick out a couple of social studies. I believe science is on the chopping block there as well. And they're replacing it with what they call service, which basically means that they can either have a job or do an internship or something. I just don't know how we're going to be able to arrange that for as many kids that have been getting a Core 40 diploma. We do something called a senior project at my high school, and it is a struggle sometimes to get mentors for these kids. And I don't know how we're going to do that for every kid that would be what we call Core 40. So, and then where the honors diploma was concerned, that is a very rigorous diploma. They have so many qualifications, and one of them is things like that dual credit. I was discussing that I teach for college credit in my psychology courses, and they have to take so many hours of college as part of their honors diploma. What they're going to do with this, it's called GPS Plus, is they're actually going to make those harder. So my kids that I know right now are already struggling. They're taking one diploma and slashing a lot of it away, and they're taking another diploma and stacking more on the shoulders of these already stressed out kids. That's kind of the gist of what I got from it.
Thank you, Sandy. Would anybody else like to elaborate on what they have, we'll say, digested from all of this information that is being shared about this?
You know, I just want to also share that it's under the whole proposal is under rulemaking. So in Indiana, that means that this is the period of time where a lot of public comment are taking. But I will also say, having lived at the State House for 4 years and watched rulemaking, it's more restricted than people think it is. So a lot of people approach it as really it is still in that decision making. And I don't think anybody on this call would argue that a lot of times that can has been kicked down the road quite a few ways before it goes into rulemaking. However, there have been a lot of changes to the initial proposal. And what I'm being told is they are still truly making some changes. So I'm hopeful some will be for the better, but as Sandy described it, it's exactly right. The biggest concern we should have is they are taking the rigor and the relevance for the current situation we're under for graduation requirements, and they're bringing those down. And so it's very concerning for all of us because we're after transferable skills. Whether a child is going into a skilled trade or a university 2-year, 4-year plus, or whatever the case may be, something post-high school that requires higher level transferable skills, they're going to be very limited. Also, a very big concern is what I decide to do as a 16-year-old or a 15-year-old looks very different sometimes when I mature as a 17 or 18-year-old who wants to pivot, and they are going to be very limited on their ability to do that. And so
Well, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sandy. No, go
Well,
ahead.
I was going to add that you were talking about how they're lowering the standards. If I read it correctly, what they're replacing the Core 40 diploma with, most of the kids graduating with that diploma would have difficulty getting into higher education. There are not enough credits for things that schools need.
And I think particularly in the science field, in the STEM fields, losing another science credit is just another impedance to kids going on into STEM fields if they decide to do that, especially if it's later on. One of my student teachers, when I was in the classroom, had her PhD in biology and came back to be a high school teacher because, and this was, 8 years ago, we still needed more. And now we're seeing this being removed. So it's concerning, even, especially they say they're pushing STEM fields and they really want to up that, but yet they're removing the science credit requirements.
And math as well.
Yeah, I would say, and to everyone's comments, again, if I put I got two hats, I one I can put on and one I want to put on. If I put my former college president hat on, you guys, I think the tool minimum, I look at two things. What are the outcomes we're driving toward, the results, and what will it cost to get there? And to me, every student who graduates from an Indiana high school should be able to do easily at least one of four things. One, every one of them should be qualified to succeed at Ivy Tech. Every single kid, everyone, nobody exception. A percent of those, it's never 100%, a percent should be able to go to any of our universities, our public universities. And again, I'd have to recalibrate the percent because quite frankly, I want it to be even higher than the university going rate today. So I would want to target that we keep moving forward. We want people then to be prepared if they choose to go into the military and succeed. And fourth would be to go into age-appropriate post-high school employment. So I know I'm clear on the outcomes, okay? As a college president, though, my fundamental question, and many of you have said this, is I would want to hear from the university people and the community college people. Are these requirements going to do that? Will they, or will they end up saddling Ivy Tech and the universities for additional remedial courses? At the community college level, we're offering too many pre-college and remedial courses now as it is. We're offering too much support that's burdening the universities. So I'm like going, the last thing we should be doing is reducing rigor at a time when colleges and universities, I know, and I've worked to band-aid this, they've had students who were not prepared. And let's not forget, we just came out of the pandemic. They're even more challenged now at being prepared. So I'm seeing a real circus here in this whole approach for the two areas I know. And if I put my rep hat on, which I plan to join the governor and you all in January, is I want to look at what pathways can guarantee us to the highest extent these outcomes, the four areas I talked about, then how much will it cost? Because my job in the House is purse strings. And when I read it, I'm like going, oh my gosh, they're going to need 10 times more counselors. They're going to need more placement people. And I'm not saying that's wrong. I just don't see that in the plan. What I see is taking the existing people, and this is what I call is bad regulation, and somehow magically thinking that all these changes can be done with existing people, and that's a disaster. That's what I got today.
And Karen, you're exactly right on a couple things. One, two, let's not forget the economic engine that our universities hold for Indiana. So if we are cutting and defunding our universities, whether that's Ivy Tech or whether that's our four-year institutions or whatever that may be, they're our economic engine for many of our communities, our largest employer, our largest transportation, our largest food service. I mean, think about the job impact beyond the academic impact for an individual who's attending those universities. So it's detrimental to what we're trying to accomplish. We're already 41st in the nation in educational attainment, and that's getting worse. And that is not a good recipe for any economic development where we need educated and healthy consumers and educated and healthy workforce. And so you're exactly right, but bringing that rigor down is really the goal of filling the jobs of today, and that is so short-sighted.
Well, and if you want to add the economic, if they're going to have to do this project as part of their diploma, and it's either service-based or work-based, who's going to pay the people to supervise those? Who is going to be the one assigning all these kids to all these people that they need to be with? Who is going to grade it? Is this something that they're going to train teachers to do? Or like Dr. Whitney said, is this going to be something where we have to train more counselors? They're just not enough answers to all the questions that are being raised by these changes. And they're just it seems to me, too much too quickly.
And I worry, I mean, I wonder about the oversight also for the jobs and internships, because I know I taught at a very small project-based learning school, and we did this. And for 300 and some students, it was time consuming, and I can't imagine doing it for a larger population. Plus, you look at the possibility that there can be some bad actors and exploitation of our students for their own personal gain, and a source of cheap or free labor. And that's not really education. So I think there's some other things that really need to be looked into and looked into hard.
They're missing, again, teachers go through background checks. Teachers are certified. We're taught specifically ways to help these kids as they develop, whether it's kindergarten, learning to read, whether it's, like me with my honors kids with psychology, trying to get them to understand Piaget's cognitive development. You have to have somebody trained in what they're doing. And we're going to turn out every kid in Indiana to somebody who's going to pick the somebodies.
The other part of this that we've not mentioned is the direct electives. So I am a firm believer that the arts make us better. And I am a firm believer in that's what a lot of times gets a kid motivated to come to school, and it offers that avenue for a lot of things, but obviously creativity and problem solving and just seeing the world differently, and that exposure and world language, to say that that is not important to expose kids to other cultures and other languages is, again, I mean, beyond ridiculous. But econ, you look at some of the humanities, and also just the English piece of this, the English requirements. Kids are, I mean, they're still, and Karen could probably tell you, we have a long way to go with literature, lit and lang, whether we're still teaching kids good writing skills or exposing them to literature. I mean, to really sell them short in a high school experience in that space makes zero sense. But I also saw too where Carol asked, how do you stop it? How do you, or what can be done to keep the current changes in the end? I mean, maybe to keep it or to not keep it. So the question is, I'm not sure which one here, but to keep the current changes from happening, it takes a new governor, and it would take the House. It also means a new state board of education, which falls under the governor's office. So, the governor appoints 8 out of the 11 appointees to the state board of education, and it would take a governor who would have a different state board who would slow this train down. So there's going to be a lot of pushback from the associations, including the teachers and the principals and the superintendents association, but we're going to need legislative help. And that's why it's important that we get all these people who are on this call up and down the ballot elected into office, so it helps all of us. But that's really, we are who we vote for, and that is the way to slow this down or to stop it.
Well, and I'm going to speak up for social studies. Cindy had a good pitch for STEM and how important it is. One of the things they're going to cut is world history or geography. It's not going to be required anymore. And, we have kids that can't find countries on a map. They have no idea how big the world is because they don't study it. They don't see the mistakes that were made in history, so they know not to repeat them in the future. I did a lot of traveling this summer in Europe, and it was amazing to see how many people that were there that were Americans that didn't understand a lot of what they were seeing because they were never taught about it. And then that goes back to what Dr. McCormick said. We need arts. They need to be taught everything from music, whether they're singing, whether they're playing instruments, whether they're learning to music theory, to listen. They need to understand art. They need to to take art classes where they're participating. And I can tell you as a psychologist that kids that are in the arts programs consistently do better in school. Their cognitive development is better, their participation is better, and they tend to be much more successful at school if they're in an arts program.
Thank you all very much for that. And thank you, Dr. McCormick. You seen that question. These are all going along with this. So thank you. And a lot of you would probably be surprised to know how many appointments a governor gets to make in Indiana. And so, this is something we would also encourage you to get educated on, because you would be absolutely shocked. We're not going to get into all of it, but the governor makes a lot of appointments. And so having Dr. McCormick be able to take that position would mean that she gets to appoint new people to a lot of these spaces that right now are incredibly biased. So I wanted to put that out there. I think that that's really important for people to know about the governorship.
Well, and I could also share with that real quick that that's your agency heads too. So like the Department of Education and the Commission of Higher Ed, which in my opinion should be working together. And for too long, they have been just very much incentivized to be silos. And it makes no sense, because education, we all understand, is a spectrum, from, childcare to universal pre-K to K-12 to post-high school. And to have all those agencies who touch a child, it makes no sense. And so making sure that we get that governor's office, again, for the boards and the commissions, but also for those agencies, so that they're working efficiently and effectively for our kids. And that's right, DCS as well.
Absolutely. Thank you for clarifying more on that, Dr. McCormick. So we've heard a lot about the new requirements. We know what we have to do now, right, guys? We know what we have to do to fix this, to get change for this. Let's move on to vouchers and the privatization of our public schools here in Indiana. It's been slowly but surely happening, and now it's coming at us full force. Would anybody like to give us their opinion on this?
I think vouchers are bleeding money from public schools. I think that if you look at some of the statistics that are out there now, a lot of the vouchers are being used by wealthier families to send their children to private schools. And in my opinion, if it is tax money, it needs to be reserved for public schools. Now, I think the idea of using vouchers to say, I live now in Clark Pleasant District. My children wanted to go to Greenwood. That would be a great use of a voucher, that they can choose a school that they feel that fits their child better, but it needs to be a public school. We don't always hold private schools to the same standards. Oftentimes, even, and we were talking about the diploma with homeschooling too. How is that going to hit homeschool families? So I think vouchers need to be reserved for transfer between public schools.
Absolutely. And for anybody who doesn't quite know what a voucher is, this is a certificate given to eligible families that's going to cover school tuition at a school of their choice. But these can be used public school, charter school, private schools. And I believe there was even talk of extending it to the homeschool families. And it's absolutely wild. So just for anybody who doesn't quite know what the voucher system looks like.
So, and I would like to remind folks that the Indiana Constitution requires us to provide a tax-funded public system, because the public school is the only school system that is required to take all, and all means all. So the requirement cannot be discriminatory. It can't be based on the skin color, who you love, how you identify, how your family marital situation is, where you live, your economic situation. I mean, public school truly accepts all. And when you get outside of those boundaries of a public school, which 90% of our families still choose, when you get outside of that, it becomes really questionable on admissions. And Indiana does not require private schools to open up the admission requirements or process, which is also alarming when they're taking our public dollars. Remember the number 1.6 billion with a B has gone away from traditional public schools to private schools. And as Sandy mentioned, the majority of kids who are taking those dollars have never stepped foot in a public school and really never had a plan to do that. So the families that are benefiting, when people tell you it's a cost savings, it is not. It is a very expensive program that's going to be opened up. Many of the families make over $200,000 a year and take vouchers. Make sure you understand it would be no different than if we took our public state park money and gave it to families who wanted to use it for a country club instead. So if they said, I don't want my money to go into state parks, I want some of that money to go into my country club fee, then what do you think would happen to our public state parks? They're a public service, and that's why public state dollars are set aside. It's no different. But Indiana has made it very clear. In January, they're going to open up the floodgates in order to make it more of a universal process. And so right now, there are some very limiting restrictions on it, but make no mistake, these vouchers are not about school choice for parents. It's about school choice for schools. And if schools want children, they will find a way to take them. If they do not like them for whatever reason, which is happening now, they don't have to take them. So public dollars should go to public schools. That's the intent of our Indiana Constitution. But 1.6 billion is going away from our traditional public schools.
And I think of that in terms of things like teacher salaries, number of kids in a classroom, resources available. I think the average teacher spends somewhere around $300, $400 on their classroom every year. And that's just hemorrhaging money from what should be going to public schools, and it's sending them to schools that again can be discriminatory, if it's a charter school, they often don't have to follow the same testing procedures. It's just, to me, almost a crime to see it happening.
I have to say, I'll double down on I just have to say it. I love saying the words Governor McCormick. I just like saying it over and over and over again in my dreams and everything. So absolutely. I read the Indiana Constitution back in January, and I read what would be my job description as a state rep. I'm just a big nerd. I think first before I do stuff. And you're absolutely right. And it's called community districts, school districts in the Constitution. So in my simple president brain, what I can't figure is why are we even talking this as a either or? Are you for vouchers or against? I am for the Constitution and for fully funding constitutional obligations. So I'll do this because I want to work across the aisle. I'm collaborative. When every school district in this state is fully funded based on the existing formula, then I will have the conversation about vouchers. Then I will do that. Until then, I think this was all premature, because until we fully fund our constitutional obligation, what the heck were we thinking about?
Absolutely. And with you saying that, I want to bring up the fact that we did hear from legislators this past year that they put monumental, historic funding for schools in Indiana. What they did not mention is that they're not even close to catching up to inflation, what they should have been working towards this whole time. And how all of that funding is getting pulled away from the voucher system, or how all of the books got paid out of that and it didn't increase for the amount of books.
And let me get back to a formula, since I am into finance and economics. Deferred maintenance. How many teachers have working conditions that are deplorable? They need, every child should not only have the very best teacher, they should have a built environment that is clean, modern, and fully supportive. Teachers not only need competitive salaries and benefits, they need modern 2024 working conditions, not 1924. My grandmother was an elementary school teacher in West Virginia in the 1920s. In many ways, the basic working condition hasn't changed.
I bet you've heard some stories.
Teachers, to me, are like the MDs of education. And they ought to be wraparound instructional support people and other people around that teacher who is a highly credentialed. I have conferred hundreds, and I may have hit over 1,000 college teaching degrees in my career as a president. I know how hard they work to get that degree and that certification and that licensure. And we are not truly supporting with appropriate working conditions. We also need to support superintendents and that whole area of, and principals and leaders, because people deserve excellent competitive salaries, good working conditions, and inspiring and supportive leaders. And right now we're letting teachers down. So until those things get fully funded, I can't even talk about vouchers.
Well, and I'll step in where salaries are concerned. I've seen since again, 30 years of doing this. I think my first contract was something like $17,000 for the year. And for a long time, what was incentive for teachers was we had the salary schedule where it went up just a little bit every year for every year of experience. That was disposed of under, I believe that's when Tony Bennett was influential in Indiana. But what it boils down to is teachers don't get raises anymore. It is few and far between. Now, my school corporation has been great about that, but I have seen so many young, talented teachers that will leave after a year, after 2 years, after 3 years, because they cannot keep up with inflation. Their salaries are not increasing. You know, they no longer get a bump up if they get a master's degree. So it's almost like we're discouraging our teachers from getting further education. And the salaries themselves, I know a lot of younger teachers who have to go and get, you know, an extra job. They'll attend bar in the evening. You know, they'll work a full-time job in the summer because, and our summers are shorter and shorter. I'm going back tomorrow. So, you know, it's killing the pool of teachers. We have so many talented people out there that are just doing other things because they can make more money doing that. And it's to the detriment of our students.
Yeah, we are sitting at 3,300 educator openings and we will never fill those. But just as a
No.
reminder, Indiana's response to that, our General Assembly came back and we can teach now in Indiana without even a high school diploma. And the only people standing in the way between that happening at the local level and it not happening would be your school board, your superintendent, and your school boards. And I will tell you, when there's no one to hire and you are having 60 kids go together in classrooms because you have no one to cover classrooms and you're trying to just blend them the best you can. I know how desperate some of those local people are getting, but the message that we just sent to with 3,300 openings that you can hire teachers without a high school diploma. I mean, that
imagine trying that with any other profession. Oh, you know what? We don't have enough surgeons, so we're going to get this scrub tech to come in and do your surgery today. Or you know what? We'll just get this guy. He's got a high school diploma. He can figure it out. That is the kind of the lack of respect I feel that teachers have been given by the Indiana legislature, especially since the Republican supermajority. We're often told that we don't matter, that our qualifications don't matter, that our efforts don't matter.
When I went to Washington, D.C. on my fellowship, I had 10 years of experience and I was making, the year before I went, I made $43,000, according to the Indiana State website that tracks all of our salaries. And I was the lowest paid teacher by $30,000 in my fellowship of 15 teachers from across the nation. And, you know, it's a problem because teachers are professionals and they need to be recognized as such, as I think Karen said, with not only pay but benefits and working conditions and all of those things, because we don't expect this or we don't do this to any other profession.
No, and I would say with all of us having been in education, we know exactly what that lack of respect is like. You know, I had people say stuff like, oh, so you teach, you really can't do anything else. And to have the legislature treat us with that same sort of contempt is just dispiriting. I mean, it hurts us. And we often feel like we are the last thing that the legislature ever thinks about.
Well,
You know,
Sandy, that's why every teacher needs to join a campaign for candidates who will fire, and their family members need to join a campaign that will fire the lawmakers who are disrespectful. The problem is, I've heard my opponent and others say they respect teachers, but I guess their idea of respect and mine are two different ideas. Because when I talk about the things I've talked about tonight, that's not what they're talking about. So I think one of the things I know that Mad Voters will do is get the word out to teachers, because I think we're in a momentum building stage in this country.
Mhm.
Teachers, faculty, their families that care about them need to rise as a concerted group and saying enough is enough. We deserve these things, and we're going to fire the people who won't give it to us and put in the people who will. Kind of simple to me.
One of
Yeah,
the
and
reasons I stepped forward. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Jennifer.
let's not forget the courts. So we have judges up. And I think Karen touched on this, when you're looking at the Indiana Constitution and you question, like, how does the voucher program even make it through the courts? Well, it makes it through the courts in decision making because they are appointed by a conservative group of people, of governors who put them there. And so we need to make sure that we're not forgetting that we have judges up this election, and too often we go in and we check the yes, retain them, yes, retain them, yes, retain them. And we need to think twice about that when we're retaining these judges that are taking away women's rights. They're also letting programs like this go through that are dismissive of the Indiana Constitution. So the courts need to be a part of this conversation. That, remember, we have judges up this year. Please make sure that and I know Mad Voters is educating people on this as well, but we need to be very thoughtful in telling people, you just check no, no, no instead of yes, yes, yes. And then the governor, which hopefully we have a no governor, obviously, will be able to appoint those once we get in.
Well, and I stepped forward to run because the lady who is my opponent was unopposed last election, and she is one of that sits on the education committee in the Indiana House. And one of the new laws that she authored, I consider to be discriminatory, and the courts haven't, nobody's challenged it in court yet, but in the judges that are appointed by conservatives, it's going to be difficult to get them to overturn it. She basically, what I have to do, if I would have a student present and ask to be called by a different name, my name is Sandra. I like to go by Sandy. I would have to alert my principal. He would have to call the parents. The parents would have to get permission for me to call the child by that name. And it doesn't take a genius to figure out that she's targeting trans kids. And, that seems to me so discriminatory. And I don't know how something like that could pass our legislature, let alone be lauded by people.
I'm so glad that the Supreme Court justices got brought up. Thank you. Again, something that the governor can help us with. So incredibly important. And this is information that you need to be talking about. Talk about what the governor is capable of doing for us, and talk about the people who are showing up and listening to us, like Dr. McCormick. There are people in other positions that are not showing up to panels like this. They are not showing up to forums that they are invited to. Mad Voters we send our survey to everybody running, and there are people who will not respond. Look for the people who are responding. I just wanted to get that out there before we move on, because I think that is very important. And especially for young people, they want to know that somebody is going to show up for them. And I think that we have a lot of people who have really proven that, who are running this year. So thank you. And I mean, we wanted to talk about those teacher pay and benefits. I don't know if you guys seen some of the graphics that we put up for our Rotten Apples series, but we put up one of the graphics about the decrease in average pay based on inflation. And that graphic got shared organically almost 2,000 times. So and there's comments and shares, and people are going, what? So talking about that, how we're not even catching up to inflation, we're technically lower than we would be if we had been caught up to inflation. It's absolutely absurd. So, if you guys get a chance, look at our Rotten Apple series on Facebook. It has that information. This is great talking points for your family and friends and the people who are willing to give you a minute of their time to hear you out. These are the important pieces of this. So I want to talk a little bit about legislative action. So Senator Ryan Mishler filed legislation, Senate Bill 255, to completely overhaul school choice last session. His bill did not move forward, but he indicated it would be a priority in 2025. What I guess let us know from your perspective as Hoosiers, what can we do to combat this in 2025? And from your position, if you win, what can you do? Let me try to get a little bit more specific. And maybe I can help out with this. So because we work in the State House and we work with all of this, I will tell people that it is incredibly important to at least do check-ins on these important bills. And so when something comes up, making sure that you're contacting not just the authors of this bill to let them know that you're not happy with it, but you need to connect with your legislator, your senator, your House rep, and you need to make your feelings known. Last year, we were able to kill multiple bills because thousands and thousands of people called into the State House. So this is something that you have to do as the people. It is our voice that matters. But if we're not using our voice, what are they going to do? They're not hearing you. They have to hear you.
Like, I think, Chelsea, one of the biggest things, and maybe unbundle this for people, we've been talking about the supermajority that exists in the legislature. I think, if I understand right, but correct me if I'm wrong, if we can add 4 more Democrats to the State House, like me, then that changes the supermajority. And that is not just prideful statement of we got 4. The committee work, the real legislation is gritty, boring, tedious, procedural, gritty work. I know that because of my time in higher education, I would often be called as a content expert or provide testimony around higher education policy. So I think what we lack here is we've had a ruling party in power for over 20 years, and they have stopped the art of having a democracy. They have stopped reaching over to anybody but themselves. And let's all be clear, the most extremist of themselves. There are good, solid, fair Republicans holding office in this state. They are not even a majority of their party. Okay. So it has been hijacked by extremists, by people who see compromise and collaboration as wrong. I see compromise and collaboration as good government, because I am driven for results, and I want to know what will it take to get there. I am driven to have teachers to have competitive salaries, and I know that's going to be a lot of money. How do we get there? So I think the first thing is we get at least 4, if not more, folks, Democrats hired into the House. I apologize, I don't remember what a number would be in the Senate. It's even more. We need a governor who's a Democrat. We need Dr. McCormick, because this is not pridefulness in being a Democrat. This is restoring good government to this state, which is desperately woeful. It has been so long. We have a generation or 2 generations of adults who don't even know what good government looks like. They do not know it. So when you ask what we can do, is that
are your own opinions coming back at you. It's an echo chamber. And if they can't ever open up and listen to other points of view, there's never going to be any change.
But Cindy, they're only going, if I may say, they're only going to do it when they have to. We are in a position, and this is again what I learned in philosophy 101 with Socrates in the cave: absolute power corrupts absolutely. I did not make that up. And we are at this point of human behavior in this state. So I want to give a larger context here. This is beyond a single policy issue, you guys. This is just how we got there. And so we need to restore balance in our government to have a better government for everybody, because this zealousness, this extremism, this so I want to also, so I'm trying to paint a picture, because people might say, oh, well, you're just cranky pants because you didn't get your way. No, I'm not being a cranky pants. This is about good government to solve these problems. One of my taglines is, I am fresh eyes to solving old problems, because I am getting a headache after seeing the same problem over and over again.
Well, and I think that there are a lot more Democrats in Indiana than people believe. And I think it's because we've been silent for far too long. We have a version of learned helplessness where you give up trying because you don't feel like you're ever going to get ahead. And we've got to get past that. We have got to take this momentum that's coming from Harris, from the popularity of her as a candidate, from the groundswell against all of these, like you say, they're almost draconian policies. where they feel like they're not accountable to anybody in our legislature. So why should they bother listening to other points of view? They want what they want, and they are arrogantly forcing things down our throats. And we need Democrats to stop rolling over and playing dead. We need to step up. We need to run for office. There are so many uncontested elections. And again, I stepped up because my opponent was unopposed last time. I'm at least make or spend. And Democrats need to get to the polls. Our voter turnout in Johnson County for Democrats, I believe, was 11% in the last election. And that's no. If we got out and voted, we could end the supermajority easily, and we could see some positive changes for Indiana.
Also, what Karen was saying about good governing and good government means that learning about policy, learning how to write policy, and writing good policy, and not just taking, which is happening in Indiana a lot, whatever the American Legislative Exchange Council puts out there for test waters, or in what, 12 other states. Those are the policies that we're seeing. So when we elect people who understand policy and know how to write good policy and know how to recognize good policy, that's even more important, because that's how we continue to have a good life, quality of life in Indiana, and we can avoid some of these issues we're having now.
Well, and speaking about good legislation, we know too, we've seen over and over again in Indiana that there are a lot of holes in our legislation. There are so many ways that we can decipher some of this legislation. Again, with the abortion ban. And again, with the abortion ban, I know probably most of the people on this call know how many people showed up every single day that they were in session. And they did not listen to Hoosiers then, because most Hoosiers believe in a balanced government, and most Hoosiers believe in access to reproductive health care. And so those are two things that our legislature has not been listening to, and we deserve better. So yes.
Well, they haven't had to listen to anybody else. They've just been talking amongst themselves. And again, I think they've gotten very arrogant. You know, when the Supreme Court wrongly overturned Roe, we were the first state up and running going, oh, yeah, we're going to ban abortion. Here we are. We're going to be number one, first in line. No, we need, and again, Karen is 100% correct. We need compromise in government. That's what keeps things balanced. I'll give you a little of this, you give me a little of that. We find something that everybody finds palatable, everybody finds fair. Our Indiana government hasn't had that for longer than I can remember.
Well, and keeping those special interests in check, the only way to do that is to have more of that balance. And I know when I was there for those 4 years, when you have such a supermajority and the executive branch is so heavy in one party as well, they don't even follow their own rules. So, you know, that's where it gets into, you have 30 seconds to testify, or, hey, we're not taking testimony today, or, hey, we changed the date of the testimony till tomorrow, when everybody just drove 5 hours to get there. I mean, that balance is incredibly important. The other piece of that, beyond just having our voice back, is the lack of transparency and the lack of accountability that goes through with a supermajority. And that's where you get those special interests that get so heavy in what's happening that it looks nonsensical. So when you're like, how in the world did they pass that bill? It's because there's no balance that forces that special interest to at least be knocked down some. It's always going to be there, but it's really in Indiana super, super heavy. But it really goes down to, and I know it's been mentioned on this call again, we are who we vote for. When you're 50 out of 50th in voter turnout, we have got to focus, which I know MADVoters is doing, on how to get out the vote. If we vote, we win. If we vote and mobilize the vote, we win. We're having some help from the federal level right now. We've got great candidates on the ballot, up and down the ballot. We have got to go through our own Rolodex, our own cell phones. We've got to make sure our friends and our family are registered. We've got to make sure they have a plan. If they don't have a plan, help them get one. But you really, really push early voting, because I've talked to a lot of people that on the day of voting, they're like, you know, I got busy, I had to pick up my kids, or I worked late and I just couldn't make it. I am pushing, as soon as early voting starts, go to the poll. Go to the poll. And so, you know, we just have got to get the vote out. We can sit and talk about, you know, the issues all day long, and I know everybody on this call is well aware of them, but we have got to get people out to vote so we can move the needle and bring some of that balance back.
100%. And I think people are really starting to realize just how much all of this abuse that is happening in our General Assembly is really affecting their lives. So being somebody who is out engaging with the communities very often, I am seeing a change, a shift in attitudes, so to speak. And
Well, I'm seeing that among my seniors. They're getting to be close to the age to vote. We have a government teacher that helps them register to vote. But I've been on social media lately telling all my former students, the ones that are still in college, get your absentee ballot request in now. You know, if you're going to be living in your university city year round, register there. But you've got to get registered and you've got to get out to vote. You know, Governor McCormick, I want to say that so bad, is 100% correct. If we get out there and we turn out in numbers that are you know, unsurpassable, we can end this stranglehold. We can do it in Indiana. We just have to believe we can, and then we have to get our butts to the polls.
well, and I believe most of the people on this call are planning on voting. So what we need from you guys is we need you to listen, learn, and share. Perhaps if you live in a university town, find a business or somebody close by the university who's willing to let you use space to do a voter registration drive. Get these kids set up with absentee ballots. You can help them learn about this. You can help them figure this out. There's training available. MADVoters is here for you. And we also have talking point issues on our website, very simplified talking points so that you have easy things to remember, easy things that you can say that are completely based in fact. You don't have to worry about us giving you something that you can't back up with sources. So please take advantage of that. I know that so many of our candidates this year are on social media, putting out graphics, making videos. Listen to those, share those, learn from those, and we can absolutely turn out and do this. I have all the faith in the world in Hoosiers. We are the hospitality state. We do care about each other. We just have to show each other that we do. Just give each other a little reminder by showing up.
Stephanie,
noticed
I'm
that-
not aware of that. That is alarming. So do we know that?
Yes, actually, and I can tell you about that. It was in Columbus, and some people who are not affiliated with candidates were wanting to organize a voter registration drive, and they're employed by the university, and they were told it was a political act and they were not allowed. Did I get that right, Stephanie?
Absolutely.
So it was concerning.
A state university would not allow people to figure out in reasonable ways to help people get registered to vote. Okay, what the hell? I'm just going to call it out. I mean, that is despicable, and particularly knowing the history of Indiana University, because I worked there 11 years at IUPUI, now IUI, and the pride of civic engagement. And to me, the fundamental first rule of civic engagement is to become a registered voter. I am shocked by that. I had no idea. And I hope in this call we will reach out and that is wrong. And that actually may violate state law in prohibiting that kind of speech. That is just wrong. And I'm appalled. As somebody, when I was vice chancellor at IUPUI, I was responsible for civic engagement and for working with different people across the. This is not partisan. This is being patriotic. This is being a voter. Okay, I'm officially. This is Karen losing her mind. I'm officially losing my mind by what you're saying.
Troubling.
Okay, that's how this looks.
It's very, very troubling because it is nonpartisan.
Yeah.
I mean,
So Stephanie, if you want, I mean, I'll get a hold of me at whitneyforstaterep.com. I'm going to go raise some hell. I mean, this is wrong. I mean, I'm a nobody
Stephanie,
there
did you
now.
contact your House representative about that?
I have not. I have not.
I would reach out, talk to your senator and your representative and let him know what's happening, because I imagine they may not know about it as well. It was something I had not heard of.
Yes,
No.
it was a colleague of mine and Cindy's that was, yeah, they were told no. And
I mean-
so I will definitely get some additional information out to you. I want to make sure that this person is protected from me giving more information. But it's that kind of stuff. I got told the same thing when I asked at because I also serve with the NAACP, and I offered to go into each of our high schools and do voter registration, and I was told that their government teachers would handle it.
Well,
And
I will say, I will vouch for our government teachers at the schools that I've been at and the schools that I associate with. They are very good about making sure that kids that are old enough to vote, like when the primary was coming up, we were telling the kids, you may not be 18 in May, but you can still vote as long as you're going to be 18 in November. So that is something that good government teachers will handle. But
I agree.
Yeah.
Good government teachers would.
Well, there's no question at the university level, these are adults and they have freedom of
that's a
speech,
different
and
game.
particularly public universities are constitutionally obligated, and employees, there's a reasonable way for any employee on their own time to come together, assemble, and execute their rights. And I just, the idea that there is a policy and or pressure otherwise is just, well, it's antithetical to a long history at Indiana University of civic engagement. So I don't know what the current leadership is thinking, but it sounds like they're wrong thinking. Now, obviously, more needs to be done. Let's look into it. If I can help champion any way, I want to, because our universities have a proud history of civic engagement in the state.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was through the course of checking into some things with the League of Women Voters, and it was like, yeah, no, we're not going to be able to do that this year. And I'm just like, what the what?
I call shenanigans on that. I'm sorry. That is just so wrong. So very, very wrong. So definitely reach out to the rep in that area and to your senator in that area.
That's very unfortunate. But I mean, then when we look at our legislators, right, who are supposed to be our role models in things like this, civic responsibility, and we have people like Senator Byrne trying to eliminate free rides to polls. Right. And so these are the role models that people are looking up to for policy. And it is completely against everything that we stand for as Americans, as Hoosiers. And so that's really, really sad. I hope that gets figured out. I'm so glad that got brought up on here, because now we all kind of have eyes and ears on it. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Absolutely.
So before we hop off and I say our thank yous, I am going to bring up something that Carol said in the chat, something about a Geo Education Academy. Is anybody on this call aware of what that means or who that is?
A what? Education Community Center?
Yeah, it says Geo Education Academy is a new school, a charter school. And Indy, one is open in Gary and Baton Rouge. They are owned by GEO Group, who privately manage prisons throughout the nation, right here in Indiana, in Newcastle and Plainfield. GEO Group is notorious for running on a bare bones budget. They are known for lawsuits for abusing staff and prisoners. The federal government will no longer sign a contract with them, and they are frightened that GEO Education Academies will repeat the same mistakes with children. So I think that it sounds like Carol wants us to be aware, have this on our radar, if some kind of GEO education is starting to show up in Indiana. That was probably something that everybody would want to know the history of. Thank you so much for sharing that with us.
This is sort of the danger of charter schools. They operate by a whole different set of rules. And so as a result, they aren't often given the same scrutiny that a regular public school would be given. And it's also a very good example of why we should not be allowing tax money to go to these. Vouchers should not be allowed to go to these schools. I mean, the purpose of charter schools when they were first developed was to encourage things like, we'll have one that's more about fine arts. We'll have a charter school that's more focused on learning about science, STEM. And they drifted away into just being these private schools that really are accountable to nobody. and they've become a tax drain, and they're taking money away from our public schools.
Yep, absolutely. Hopefully, we can make some huge changes. This is a huge election year. Great candidates once again up and down the ballot. We have amazing MVPs. We encourage you to check them out. We also encourage you to check out the ballot buddy at madvoters.org so that you can really figure out who these safe representatives and elected officials are. Make the right choices for you, your family, and your community. I want to thank everybody for being here tonight. Thank you, panelists, so much for sharing your opinions and your insight with us. And thank you all so much for being here.